So the way that I'm going to break this down for you guys is to talk about the 6 different tenets or 6 different factors that you want to make sure you're including when you're researching any residency program. Now this video is going to include a lot of information, so I would suggest that you guys take notes, or if you just look down in the description below, I will include the templates that I've mentioned in this video, as well as an outline of the things that we discussed. So let's get started. So the first factor that you want to include in your research for any type of program is to try to figure out what their evaluation criteria is. So I would suggest to you guys calling or emailing the program coordinator for any of the residency programs or medical schools, whichever place that you guys are applying to. Reach out to them and ask them if you could have the interview evaluation criteria, or if there's a rubric for how you might be evaluated. I know that a lot of the times when I asked, they just emailed me the rubric that they used. A lot of the time I didn't even have to ask, they just would include that in their interview offer package. And sometimes they just didn't have that type of information, so not really a big deal. Having the evaluation criteria is important because it will allow you to anticipate certain types of questions, or just certain things that you would be judged on during your interview process. Next factor that you want to include in your residency program research is intrinsic research about the program itself. So this will be the most important step in helping you answer the question, why are you applying to this program specifically? Now I know that most applicants to residency will send somewhere between 40 and 100 applications out. There may not be a specific special reason, but you want to convey to the program that you are particularly interested in them. Even though they know, like low key, you're applying everywhere else, they want to know what is it about their program that really intrigues you? Why are you interested in them? Why are you invested in them? Because if you think about it, if you were going to hire somebody, or if you were going to accept somebody into a program, you would want them to be enthusiastic about it. So in formulating your idea of why you're applying to a program, you want to make sure you come up with a simple and concise answer that can be said in like 15 or 20 seconds, just so they know it's well thought out and they know that you've been putting some time into this. The next thing that you'll want to consider when you're doing the program specific research is looking for key faculty connections. So are there any faculty at the program you're interviewing at who trained at your current institution, or vice versa? So that's hugely important, especially in smaller medical fields like mine, for example. If you guys don't know, I am in my intern year of my otolaryngology head and neck surgery residency. People's relationships, people's connections, networking, that goes a super long way. I'd say it's like one of the #1 deciding factors on who matches where, because even after the interview happens, the attendings are behind the scenes texting or calling their colleagues, asking about you, especially if you did a good job in the interview. They kind of want to know what their peers' impressions are of you. So make sure you're aware of what faculty connections exist, because you can bring these connections up during the interview, and you can use those connections to facilitate your progression in the rank list, especially if it's at a program you're highly interested in. So if there are some faculty connections, you can reach out to the people you know and say, hey, I'm really interested in this program. I know you train there. If they ask, would you mind putting in a good word for me? Or even just bringing up the relevant individuals during your interview. It's just a nice way to show that you've been engaged in the interview research process, that you're interested in the program, and that you took the extra steps. The next component of your intrinsic research or your program-specific research is looking into the curriculum of your residency program. So what is the structure of the program going to look like throughout the life of your residency? For example, like I said, I'm in my intern year of my otolaryngology head and neck surgery residency out here in Los Angeles, California. And the way that my intern year is structured is that I'll be 6 months on service and 6 months off service. When I'm 6 months on service, that means I'm in the otolaryngology department, rotating with the otolaryngology physicians, and I'm managing otolaryngology patients only. When I'm off service, I'm rotating in peripheral specialties that are somehow related to the field of ENT. When I was doing my residency program research, I knew that I did not want to prioritize residency programs that had a blanket 6 months of general surgery only. I really wanted the diversity in my training where I had different rotations during my intern year, so I can have kind of like a broader range of experiences. The curriculum also includes things that will happen in later years of the residency. You want to think about whether you're going to be rotating at other hospitals, whether there's a community hospital that has a different patient population, perhaps in a lower income neighborhood. Do you have access to a VA? Do you have access to a specific children's hospital? Also think of things like dedicated research blocks, and even time blocks dedicated to international travel where you can participate in global health. So the next component of your intrinsic research or your program-specific research is to understand if your program has a medical research focus, or if they emphasize lots of research participation within your residency experience. I would look up each attending that would be interviewing me for that interview day for that specific program and see if they had any recent publications. I would make note of this, and this would just be conversation fodder for me to bring up during my interview, especially if I was involved in any related research. If they do have related research that they're completing, or there's a focus that kind of matches up with things that you have experience with, then you definitely want to mention that, because they will consider that to be of value. That'll just show them that you would be an asset at their program. All right, so the next factor that you want to consider when you are researching your residency programs is to research the location where the program exists. So this is something that's actually extremely important, especially in the context of having virtual interviews, considering that we are still somewhat in the throes of the pandemic. Most people are not traveling to complete their interviews, they're just doing it right from their own home on their laptop. In the past, you'd be able to travel to these locations to interview, and you'd have a first-hand look at the city that you'd be in. You can look at the facilities that the hospital has to offer and get a general vibe of how your experience would go and how life would be like in that city. Now, we really can't do that. So what you'll want to do to the best of your ability is to research the location of where the program is, or like research the city, research the town, and the surrounding areas. So things to consider are like, what's the weather like in that area? It was a high priority for me to be in a location where it was warm and sunny. I really did not want to deal with the snow. I had spent medical school in the Midwest and it had snowed a lot there. Not to mention, literally all of my family lives in California, so I really wanted to be closer to family, and that's proven to be a huge mental health boost. I say all that to say location can be a huge priority, and you shouldn't be ashamed to have that as a priority. I know a lot of the time people can be compelled to rank programs solely on their reputation, but understand that your happiness and your mental health throughout the life of your residency should be of the utmost priority. You'll probably also want to consider the size of the area that you're applying to. So is this going to be a large city, or is this going to be more of a rural medicine experience? So the spectrum is pretty wide on the types of cities that you could be applying to. So the third factor that you'll want to consider when you are researching your residency program is their online presence. And I'm speaking specifically in terms of their social media presence and their news media presence. So I know during my interview experience, I spent a lot of time looking at the Instagram accounts of programs that I got interviews for. It gave me really good insight on what residency life looked like, if the residents spent time with each other outside of the hospital and hung out and just kind of did things together, kind of in like a more collegial fashion, obviously something a little bit less professional. But this gives you an idea of what things are like when you're not focused and in hospital mode. How friendly are you with your co-residents? How friendly are you with your attendings? Do you guys do stuff outside of the hospital together? So this is a really good way to see if that exists. Keep in mind, if pictures or evidence of these things do not exist, it doesn't mean that it's not happening, it just means that they haven't posted it. So looking into social media can provide you some insight, but it definitely should not be driving your decision, especially if you don't see a social media account for the program, or if they haven't posted certain types of content that other programs posted. Another thing that you'll want to consider is their news media presence. So what I would do is I would just Google search like whatever program, otolaryngology residency, and like go to the news section of Google and see if any articles came up. I would also go on the program's website. A lot of the time program websites have a news section and you can click and see what press has been released lately. A lot of the time it's press of new publications. A lot of the time a physician is highlighted in the news for certain discoveries that they've made, or certain surgical techniques or clinical techniques. And it's just really interesting to see which programs are on the cutting edge of research and on the cutting edge of medicine. On several occasions, I would look up news for a program and see a physician highlighted who would be one of my interviewers, so that during the interview I kind of brought that up and asked more questions about that news release. And at the end of the day, if somebody's in the news for something, they're probably pretty passionate about their accomplishment that they were being highlighted for. And so they love talking about it, and they're going to remember you in a positive way for that. On the other hand, though, sometimes you'll find things in the news that aren't particularly positive about a program, and you'll notice they might have been involved in a controversy or some type of litigation. And again, not necessarily reason for you to make a decision about whether you're going to rank a program first or last, but it's just really important to be as well informed as you possibly can be. So the fifth factor that you'll want to consider when you are doing your residency program research is to understand which questions you will have for the program. Any interview is as much of the program trying to get to know you as it is you trying to get to know the program. One of the most important questions that you can get asked during an interview is, what questions do you have for me? Or what questions do you have for us? So if you are asked, do you have any questions, or what questions do you have for us, and you answer that with nothing, or you answer with no, that is a huge missed opportunity. This is your chance to showcase your interest in the program. This is your chance to show that you've done a lot of research, that you came really prepared by asking something super insightful. So more often than not, the program will provide you with a surplus of information and you will genuinely have no further questions. Sometimes you won't even know what to ask because you've been given so much information and all this information is new and intriguing. You really can't come up with a question because sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But it's really important for you to come up with something, and come up with something before the interview day so you're not kind of caught in the moment thinking and trying to pull something out of your ass. So it's definitely really important to find things to ask questions about. So when you're doing your intrinsic program research or your program specific research, note down certain things that piqued your interest and then try to form a question around them. Sometimes it's appropriate to even ask questions that you already know the answer to, just as a means of facilitating further discussion. This is a great way to keep the conversation going, especially if there's like some dead space in the interview. When I formulated the questions that I plan on asking different programs, I put the questions into two different categories. The first category was questions related to the program, the curriculum, and certain benefits that they offer to residents. And the second category of questions was about research. When you're asking questions about a program's curriculum or the benefits that they have to offer residents, make sure your questions are concise, specific, and open-ended. You don't want to ask a yes or no question because that does not facilitate further discussion. And a lot of the time, answers to yes or no questions can be easily found online. You'll just have to consider your priorities and the things that are most important to you when it comes to formulating questions. But the point is just to make sure that you have something in the bag that you can ask when the time comes. So the final factor that you'll want to consider, factor number 6, when you are researching any residency program. Now this is a little bit more of a nebulous concept. I would put this more on the side of extrinsic research. So we had our intrinsic research or the program-specific research where we delved really deep into what the program has to offer and their curriculum and why you might be applying. But this extrinsic research is more so about anticipating or even facilitating the progress of a smooth interview. So this research will really come in handy when there are opportunities for you to direct the conversation during the interview. I kind of break this up into two different categories, one with small talk and the other one with emphasis points. So the small talk really could be about anything that you're interested in or that you think might be of mutual interest between you and your interviewer, whether that's sports or something listed on their faculty page as one of their interests. Perhaps you both have children and you want to talk about that. But this is really an opportunity for you to be able to relate to your interviewer more or get to know them more personally just by, exchanging some small talk. Whenever you're doing your intrinsic research, you will find, just little bits of information that kind of stand out in your mind. Whenever you're looking at the faculty profiles of your interviewers, you'll start to notice little things about their profiles, little spaces where they talk about their interests. And if you write that down and bring it up in the interview itself, that's just more conversation fodder. Okay, and the next thing here is your emphasis points. This is huge right here, super important. An emphasis point is something that you want to make sure is said during the interview because it is something that you consider as part of your application to be one of your primary strengths. We all have those little bits of our application that are more impactful in our eyes than other bits. You might have been, the primary researcher on this one project, or you might have been the primary leader on a particular initiative or a particular volunteer experience. But sometimes you might not be asked about that. Given the fact that your interviewers read so many applications and have so many papers to sift through on their desk, they might not necessarily see what you think is the most important on your application. Now, there's no guarantee that your interviewer will ask you about what you think is the most important part of your application. Perhaps something else stood out to them. If you have the time within your interview, you have your emphasis points, just so you can highlight those strengths and make sure that the interviewer knows the best components of your application and the best parts of you as a candidate. Okay, you guys, so those are the 6 different factors that you want to consider when it comes to how to properly and completely research your residency program or your medical school. So looking back, we talked about the evaluation criteria as tenet number 1. Tenet number 2 is your intrinsic research or your program specific research. Tenet number 3 is looking at the location. So are you going to be in a big city, a small town? What do the surrounding areas look like? Component number 4 is the program's online presence. Just make sure you are the most well-informed about what current events are going on with the program right now. Point number 5 was to think about the types of questions that you plan on asking them. This is an interview, not just you being interviewed by the program, but also you interviewing the program. You can have some canned recycled questions, and you definitely will, but try your best to apply them specifically to that program. The program and the interviewers will definitely appreciate it. And factor number 6, tenet number 6, the last point that you want to make sure that you are considering during your program research is the extrinsic research. So think about the conversations that you will be having. Come up with some small talk points, and just as importantly, make sure you have your emphasis points. But all right, you guys, thank you for sticking with me. I really do appreciate that. I really hope this content was valuable for you guys. If it was, let me know by giving me a thumbs up, subscribing to my channel. So I do have a question for you guys. What is your biggest priority when it comes to applying for a medical school or a residency program? What types of things do you want in your residency experience? Is that global health opportunities, or do you just want to live in an awesome city? Please let me know down below in the comments. I would love to hear your guys' responses. Definitely, if this was helpful content to you guys, make sure you're sharing this video. Click the share button on YouTube, get the link to this video, send it to your friends, send it to your family, post it in your medical school group chat, post it on your Facebook, Instagram, YouTube page, whatever you have to do. Make sure this video is seen by as many people as possible, because this was the exact process that I went through when I was applying to residency, and it really just helped me establish a consistent format and a consistent template that I could use from one residency interview to the next, and really helped me streamline the process. All right, so that's all I got for you guys. I appreciate you joining me. I will see you in the next one.